This is the I Read Comic Books podcast, the very best podcast for regular comic book fans. I'm your host, Mike Rapin, and joining me this week, two silent panels of a comic featuring space venturing pilots. This week, I am joined by Nick White.
Hey.
And our very special guest for this episode, Jesse Lonergan.
Hey, how you doing?
Thank you both for joining me this week. I'm very excited to talk about comic books with the both of you, as we do every week here on the show. But before we get into that, Jesse, folks at home may not know who you are. Before we start just throwing questions at you and just start talking as everybody should know you, could you introduce yourself a little bit and tell us what you've been working on?
Yeah. Should we shame the listeners for not knowing who Jesse is?
I mean, if they've been listening to the show long enough.
First off, you should know who Jesse is, okay? It's kind of a big deal. He was going to say it, but I was like, I'll take care of this.
Go ahead.
Jesse Lonergan, the bad boy of comics. Here you go.
That's completely untrue. I'm like the least bad boy. I'm like the boring old man of comics. But
we can work with that. We can title our YouTube clips with that. We could work with that.
The prog rock guy of comics. My name is Jesse Lonergan. I'm an Eisner nominated writer, artist. I've done solo work. Probably the biggest was this book called HEDRA that came out in 2020. And it's sort of why I have a career. And then I've also done work mainly as an artist with Van Jansen on a book called ARCA, Mike Mignola in the Hellboy universe, a book called Miss Truesdale, and the Fall of Hyperborea. And then most recently I did a book with Pornsak Pitchashot called Man's Best that came out through Boom Studios. I think that's it. Then there's smaller stuff too, but those are the big ones.
Yeah. And I think we've read or talked about at least all of those books in some capacity on the show. Yeah. Not to say that we're obsessed with you or anything. I'm just saying you've put out some good books and we appreciate it.
It's a healthy interest. It's a healthy interest.
Right. We're very excited to have you on the show today. And so to get things started, I have these two legally mandated questions that I have to ask. And that is, how have you been? How have comic books been? What have you been reading? Jesse, let's just go right back over to you. What's been up, man?
I've been doing pretty good. Just had my daughter's third birthday party yesterday.
Nice.
So I feel like it's been like a week of like, oh man, 3 years of having a kid, because my only child probably will continue to be.
Sure.
But I'm doing pretty good. Working steadily. Feels like maybe the child cocoon is coming to an end. I might be able to start having something like a normal life. Probably not, but people talk about like going to see movies, and it's like, yeah, that I don't do that anymore. Sure. I used to do that, but I feel like that might be around the horizon.
That's exciting.
And comic books, I don't know, comic books are good. I'm enjoying comic books and enjoying working on all the stuff I'm doing. I don't know how much of it I can talk about.
Okay.
But steadily drawing stuff I'm excited to draw.
Well, that's what we love to hear, right? You're not just like getting hammered away to say like, I've got to work on this thing. I hate the book.
Yeah.
Just slaving away mindlessly for these people, and I hate it. That would have been a hard thing to pivot from.
Yeah. feeling like creatively pretty good. Like I'm in a good creative place, whatever that means.
Well, good.
And reading wise, I was talking to you guys before we started recording that I feel like I'm the worst because I feel the way I read is really bad. Like in terms of like, oh, how do you want someone to read your book? And it's like, oh, like in a tired state where they only like read like 10 pages at a time or something like that. It's like, and then pick up something totally different. So I'm always sort of all over the place, but I backed Tony McMillan's Kickstarter for Serious Creatures, which was this 12 issue series he did on his own, self-published, and then he just did the collected edition, and it follows sort of the fictionalized life of Rob Bottin, who it's like this weird like wish fulfillment fantasy sort of for me, where it's like he's he manages to like meet the special effects people of the making of a fictionalized Jaws called Finn, and then like sort of like ends up in the movie industry at like age 15, and like from like the late 70s through the 80s and 90s. And it's it has like him working on masks, working on like the cantina scene in Star Wars, and all of this sort of like real movie history and special effects history, which is, if you're kind of a dorky guy like me, you think it's super cool. But then it's also blended with all this sort of fictional stuff, like the guy who played the alien and the guy who played Predator are actually the same person, and they believe that life is a simulation and nobody is real and they're the only real human. Like, and it's like taking all these things, or maybe you've heard like things about like the shark in Jaws, or the Mos Eisley cantina scene, and sort of like twisting them, and it's like, and it's sometimes just the point like, wait, is this real? Is like what it is. And Tony, I know Tony, like we're friends, and he's just got this really like funny sense. Like he doesn't refer to any of the filmmakers by their real names. He just calls them the Beards. All the movie makers,
Spielberg and Lucas.
So there's like Shark Beard, and then there's Space Beard, Doctor Strange Beard, like. All these different beards for the directors. It just sort of like cracks me up. And there was one called like No Beard. I was like, who's No Beard? Like, I was like, I don't know who that one is. All the other ones, I could sort of like figure out. Like the God Beard is Francis Ford Coppola. Bluebeard is James Cameron, because all of his movies are so blue.
Sure, I thought like sure.
So it's got like this like, it's all about this like geeky stuff that I'm super into, and then it's also got like this great sense of humor and the blending with like fictional stuff, and then it's also got like this element of like this sort of like coming of age, growing up story, and like relationship with his like sister, with mom, like absent father and stuff, and it's just like a really, to me, just like I don't know, a super sweet spot of a book where I'm almost like, yeah, this is all I want. And his art's really great too. It's got this like sort of raw, scritchy style, with a lot of sort of noise on the paper, but like there's some. He does everything too. It's all lettered by him, colored by him. Everything.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm just looking at his Etsy page that you linked, and man, this looks incredible. I see he's got a book called The Amazing So and So. That's great. That's great.
Yeah, he just had a book come out a month or two ago with a Mad Cave called Attaboy, which is sort of like a video game story about this video game that only he remembers. And it's sort of set up in the form of like the instruction manual for a video game that only he remembers. And so it's a lot of cool stuff. A lot of like, I feel like ideas that I'm like, oh, that's a really good idea. That's like totally an idea I will never have. So it's a lot of fun, and I've really been enjoying. I'd read some of it before, and so some of it's rereading, but I'm getting into like what I haven't read yet, because I'm a terrible reader, and so I had issues like a year ago, 2 years ago, and like put them down and didn't get back to it. But yeah, so that's what I've been reading.
Awesome.
It sounds a lot almost like a Forrest Gump-esque narrative of like the 80s, where you have this guy who's sort of bumbling his way through all these historical events of like 80s pop culture, and somehow finding his way into like being a pivotal. Like when you were describing that, I was like, this sounds like Star Wars meets Forrest Gump, basically.
Yeah.
Which sounds great, actually. That sounds
it's
fantastic.
It's also like crazy, like how much like special effects touches like through the 80s. Like Thriller is like special effects, and so like Thriller comes up in this, because that music video was such a huge thing. John Carpenter movies, all the sort of like 80s weird stuff that I like. It's hitting there. Maybe a geekier Forrest Gump.
Sure.
Sure.
So that's
No,
awesome.
no, that's
I definitely
sounds
want to give
great.
this a look. I unfortunately never heard of Tony's work before, so I'll have to give this a look. And it seems like he's got a bunch of stuff online that could be easily available.
Yeah, I mean, he's he's a friend of mine, and he's prolific. Like he like puts out a lot of work. I was talking with him and Madi Keen at Heroes Con, and they're both doing sort of indie stuff. Madi's sort of leading towards, like, I guess, the outlaw comic style thing, and it was just like, well, you guys are just doing so much,
Hmm.
and it made me feel like guilty because I was like, yeah, I'm just working, like the amount of my like own personal stuff that's like just 100% me. It feels like it's gotten less and less. So I was like, oh, I gotta start doing my 100% Jesse Lonergan stuff again. So it's like very very inspirational to see his
Hell
work.
yeah. Oh, I'm not going to complain if you decide to just 100% do that. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Nick, what about you? Well, how have you been? How have comic books been? Tell us about what you've been reading.
Yeah, things have been good. It's getting real hot in Michigan again. I honestly thought we were done with that, but apparently we're not. But that's allowed me to stay inside and, instead of like, appreciating the great outdoors and the Great Lakes and all of that, it's like, I guess I just better go read some comics or do something like that.
Sure.
So, in line with Mike's mandate that I follow the Goodreads theme for this month,
Listen,
did
Mike
see
called me
that,
up
and I
last
was
night.
like-
He's like, you better read a book. You better read a book with this theme. And I'm like, who is this? And then the phone hung up, and I was like, oh, well.
No, I saw that note and I was like, I don't know. Goodreads.
No, it doesn't
No,
apply. It
that's
doesn't
okay.
apply to the stars, Jesse. You're fine. You're
okay.
fine. It's just
No,
for us
so-
plebeians.
We do try. No, we try to find. We have a monthly theme on our Goodreads, which is like a whole thing as part of our show. I didn't even stick to it because, quite honestly, I couldn't bring myself to like read a book that was going to just make me cry. Which is usually like all the autobio books that I have are just like
Yeah,
about
yeah,
these awful things. I mean, they're personal experiences, but they just usually tear me up because I feel a lot when I'm reading comics. So I couldn't bring myself to do it. But Nick fortunately did, because it sounds like you found something that fits the line that isn't going to make everybody cry.
Mike, that's exactly right. That was honestly my struggle when I saw the theme. And this is like no shame to comic book creators, but it's difficult to find nonfiction, autobiographical memoir, graphic novel comics that like don't need to come with an antidepressant.
Sure.
And so I'm really glad that I found this book called Three Rocks, the story of Ernie Bushmiller, the man who created Nancy. And admittedly, like, I haven't actually read much Nancy. I've seen a couple strips here and there. Obviously, Nancy's had a moment, you could say, I think, within the last couple years.
Mhm.
What was the whole thing? Like, Sluggo is lit, right?
Yes.
That took off, and we're starting to see Nancy in different things. And I was like, is this an old strip? Is this a new strip? Is this like still going on? Like, what's the deal? And so when I was looking through some options, I saw that, and I was like, well, this looks like a perfect opportunity. And it's written and drawn by Bill Griffith, who's a cartoonist born in 1944. He's perhaps best known for his comic strip Zippy, and he's apparently credited with the catchphrase, "Are we having fun yet?" Which, as a fan of Party Down, that was like a small revelation for me. Yeah, apparently this is like a catchphrase. I think in Zippy was, "Are we having fun yet?" So
Did not know that.
The more you know, the more you know. Yeah, I was just, I mean, before I even got to the book, I was like reading about Griffith and like, holy cow, like this guy like worked for National Lampoons and National Lampoon and New Yorker. Like at 80, he's still doing daily Zippy strips. Last year, he wrote this book, Three Rocks, as well as a comic book memoir about his marriage. So like, the grind is real, apparently, for like, no pressure, Jesse. Like, you work at whatever level or whatever cadence you want, but I'm just letting you know. I don't know. Does this make you nervous to hear this? Is this like, or like, do you like view this with admiration? I mean, I don't.
Like someone working at 80s sounds great. Like, I don't think that like gets me nervous. Like Joe Kubert worked till the end of his life, basically, and like I guess that feels good to me about like what people are doing when they're still able to do it at an advanced age. I just realized Ridley Scott's like 86 years old or something. Like
Yeah, and
did
he
not
won't
realize.
take his claws off the Alien
No,
franchise, but
but
that's
like
a whole
he's still
nother.
like, but he's still like
Jesse,
working
you've
and
opened up
busy.
Pandora's box now. No.
No,
I was just shocked to find out. Like I thought he was a much younger than that. I
Yeah.
knew he'd made Blade Runner and Alien, but I was just like, but he was older when he made those movies. Like he'd
Right.
already had
Yeah,
like another
yeah.
career, and so
Have you
like
heard this story? Oh, go ahead, Jesse.
no, just like hearing people working at like a very high level and doing their craft at an old age just is cool. Like
Yeah.
it feels good that their inspiration is still there and their motivation is still there.
I think, knowing that someone is at that age and not having been replaced by a machine or a computer is like, that gives me hope. Like I look at that and I'm like, oh my gosh, we can only hope.
Yeah, well,
But,
we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. Nick, please tell us about this book before we
No.
go into like, I need an antidepressant talking about the future.
Yeah. So basically, Griffith chronicles Ernie Bushmiller's career, like starting out as a copy boy for the New York World. And like, it's just such a weird story to like see this time where he's like, yeah, I was just delivering stuff to the art bullpen and they let me sort of just sit in and look at them draw. And then some days like his boss would be like, hey, when you're done sweeping up this mess, why don't you go like fill in the inks and like do the lettering on this? And it's like it's not such a weird, like it's such a weird day and age to see this, like, oh, you can just kind of amble around and try a little of this and do a little of that, and it just seems so foreign to like how things are now. And you just it covers his career, and it's this really interesting combination of biography, but it's also a good kind of exhibition of Bushmiller's original work, which gets injected into it. And it's also gets just really confusing because at a lot of points, Griffith will almost like a collage. He'll take elements of Bushmiller's work and like redo the lettering to fit his own work. So it's almost like he'll create Nancy comics that are like intertitles between the chapters of Griffith's life. It's really, really interesting. You learn a lot about the comic book industry and the cartooning industry. There's a lot about even just like art and art criticism and art theory, just because there's so much of a discussion around Nancy of like, is this highbrow art? Is this lowbrow art? Back then and now, and like, how should we appreciate it and how should we approach it? And yeah, it's really it's fascinating. I think people who like comics and want to learn and want to sort of get an appreciation of things. It's fascinating, and just a really zoomed in look at his craft and how he did things. Especially like it talks about how he would like work backwards, like he would come up with the final panel first and then just figure out how to get there.
That's cool.
Yeah. Which, when you're sort of like, when your goal is like a gag comic, or I think he would call it like a zinger, the zinger moment, he would come up with that first and then build to it. And just other weird, fascinating nuances. Like he would be working on 4 different strips at once. He would have like 4 different desks and he would just switch between them, like as he would like get ideas. So he would just build on different strips at different times. And the author at that point follows that by saying like, I have never met anyone else who works this way. This is just him. Yeah, it's fascinating. I would say like, check this out. Especially, I think there are so many people out there who have like been like, oh, I want to learn about the history of comics, and you end up reading something about Stanley in the 60s or whatever, and like that's fine. That's a story that's out there. It exists. Most of us have seen it or read it, and to a lesser degree probably know a little bit about Kirby and Kirby's narrative, but there are these other stories out there. And there was one other thing I found really funny. Apparently, like, I mean, this goes into like all of his correspondences and it includes letters. Like, it's really well put together. But apparently one of his correspondences was with Charles Schultz for about a couple of years. But then Schultz started getting like preachy with the religion. And so Bushmiller like stopped writing to him because like, yeah, Charles was getting like proselytizing apparently.
Interesting.
Yeah. Oh man, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
you've sold me on this book, Nick.
It's
I
good.
wasn't aware that this was out, and this sounds really cool. If only because I have a passing curiosity with Nancy. Like every time it shows up on some other platform that isn't
Yeah,
actually the website that publishes Nancy or the newspaper that publishes Nancy, I'm always like, I should go and read that. I realize it's 3 to 5 panel strips, right? Like, and I never actually think to like find a way to get like a regular subscription or something to that because it is usually pretty funny. And if I'm not mistaken, someone recently took over Nancy and they were doing like a guest spot, and then one of the bits was that they were inserting all of their friends into the Nancy comic to like make them part of the canon. That was the last bit that I saw of Nancy, but that was pretty recent. So
yeah,
this is
yeah,
a cool find.
yeah. It's great. It's really, really, really interesting.
Gotcha. Well, let me talk really quick about a book that I read, if only because I have been slowly but surely going insane in my preparation to go to Japan at the end or the beginning of next month.
Hmm.
I'm going to be gone for 3 weeks. So I'm sorry, everybody listening. You're not going to hear my voice for 3 weeks. Spoilers, you actually are because we pre-recorded a bunch of episodes. But I've been stressing to the point where like now I'm starting to get like back pain, and so I need to do something to just relax. And that was sit down and read a bunch of Image #1s. Image sent us over a couple of comps for different books, and I sat down and read Standstill #1. That comes out this week, I think, from Lee Lowridge, with art by Andrew Robinson. The summary that I could give this book is kind of the summary of the full issue. So it's not full spoilers, but it is partial spoilers. People are getting murdered in the world, and no one seems to know how or why. And we're talking about people at high levels, people that are super corrupt, all over the world, and no one knows why. But maybe one recently fired governmental scientist has the answer, a secret device that allows the user to stop time, and maybe only he can actually catch this person. This book is it's very interesting because it takes a second to kind of get to that bit of like what is actually at the center of the story, and that's fine because I think all of the buildup is actually really fun. Some of the dialogue is a little over the top at first. Like I was kind of like, is this serious? Like, is this book actually serious? It's really, really corny. But it all sort of makes sense by the end as to why one person is kind of talking in this just incredibly smarmy way. What does matter though at the center of this book is kind of a whodunit, how this person is going to get stopped. There's this really interesting like two sides of a narrative driving towards a center point of where these characters will eventually like cross over, and I really liked the setup that Lowridge builds in this first issue. It's got kind of my favorite thing, which is like governmental conspiracy kind of baked into the story. Everyone who
Sure.
listens to the show probably knows that I'm a big fan of that kind of stuff, or at least reading about it in fiction. But I am being intentionally vague because the first issue is a little thin in terms of that, like there is one thing that this issue is trying to do, and for me to tell you would just give away every single page that happens in the book. So I think this is going to be a stand-up, like 8 issues, got a lot of legs. And I think Andrew Robinson's art, I don't know if I've seen them work on other things, but holy smokes, it is like full panel painted portraits. Every single page is absolutely beautiful. It's violent, it's snarky, it's everything that you'd want out of like a really high caliber comic. And I can't believe they're doing it for 8 issues straight because this book looks gorgeous. And this isn't like Alex Ross level, like so beautiful it should just be a painting on a wall in a museum. This is like really good comics painted works. And I don't know, I was really impressed with just like how fantastic this book looks. I kind of likened it to like covers of 2000 AD, where there's just like a ton of detail and it's absolutely beautiful, but it's the whole book from start to finish. So I would recommend, if you're looking for a new #1 to check out this week, Standstill #1 is fantastic.
Andrew Robinson is just like such a fantastic artist. Like
Mhm.
I don't know if I've just missed what he's done, but like it feels like there's not a lot of comics work by him. Like
Sure.
to me, like it's just like I remember getting a book like in '97 called Dusty Star. That's like this black and white book by him, and it's like the only. It's not a complete series or anything, but this is the only issue that ever came out, and it was
Oh,
like just a fantastic. I remember being like in awe of the art, and I'm still like in awe of his art. Um, and so it's like it's to when I saw that you in the notes that I was like, oh, there's like a 60 pages of comics by Andrew Robinson. I was really excited
yeah.
because I just haven't seen that much. Like I feel like it's sometimes it's just like, oh, you just missed it. Like he's done a lot
Mhm.
of stuff and you missed it. So if that's the case, I feel bad. But like, um, Yeah, and it sounded it. I was reading the description of it. It's all spreads, like it's all 2-page spreads, the entire
No,
issue.
no. It's interesting because there's a mix. It
Okay.
is actually like paneled. Like most of the pages are paneled, but
Sequential art,
they're
yeah.
big panels. But yeah, there's a couple of big 2-page spreads that look really really nice. But on the whole, it is just like standard sequential
Okay.
like paneled
I
pages.
thought the image description described it as like all 2-page spreads, almost like 300 was.
Oh, man.
When 300 came out in single issues, it was
Yeah.
just all
Yeah.
2-page spreads, which was actually, I thought, kind of an unpleasant way to read it. I was like, and I much prefer the wide book, the collected
actually,
edition.
there is okay. Now that you say that, I'm going through the PDF right now. Like, it is technically all 2-page spreads.
Well, they're not like
in
one
some
panel,
ways.
but like the basically dimensions are basically like wide. It's like a wide screen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it is panel. I guess I was reading it. I don't know how I was reading it, but yeah, it is. Everything is wide 2 pages. So that'll be interesting to see in print. I think I'm going to go to my comic shop right before I leave.
So I think it's
and
60
try
pages
to get this
too.
Yeah.
Like, but if you're reading it as just spreads, it's only 30, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But yeah, this book will be totally worth folks checking out. I think you'll really really dig it. It's a fantastically like good looking book. It's got a really cool hook. I think the end of the first issue is very classic Image, just like getting you right in the cheek and pulling you for the next one. And for an 8-issue series, I think they've got a lot of room to like breathe and like flesh this thing out, have a lot of fun with our main character. There's, I guess, 2 main characters, but one of the main characters who's doing all of the business that's makes the book very funny. And it'll be interesting to see how they develop like the other side of the story as the mystery's trying to get solved. So yeah, take a look, folks.
What happens when a relentless robotic AI horde crash lands on a world full of fantastical creatures and magic-wielding sorcerers? Find out in The Few of Far Between #1, now available for pre-order on Kickstarter. Written by Mad Cave Studios talent search winner Damian Becton and drawn by Rosario Mendez.
Wait, Matt, what's happening? We haven't even started the episode yet, and you're already doing dramatic synopsis reads?
Yeah, brother. I just found out about this awesome Kickstarter for The Few of Far Between. Have you heard of it?
No, I haven't. Tell me more.
In this thrilling fantasy sci-fi comic, a black magic-wielding sorceress who reluctantly allies with a friendly, inferior version of the robots, leading a chosen few to prevent complete takeover. When these characters learn of a plot to sabotage the queendom that keeps them safe, fates get crossed, friendships are built, trust gets tested, and, of course, lots of thrilling fantasy sci-fi action.
Oh, Billy, that sounds fun. How can people support this comic?
Go to farbetweencomic.com to go directly to the Kickstarter campaign and sign up for pre-launch, or pre-order digital or physical copies of The Few of Far Between #1 today. That's www.farbetweencomic.com. Campaign ends September 5th.
But let's move on. Let's talk about comic books that we're looking to read next, books that are on the top of our pile, whether they are new or old or just something you're trying to get off your shelf. I want to shout out some of our folks hanging out with us live on our Discord today who are reading a bunch of books. Danny's going to be reading the Aliens versus Avengers #1, the Hickman and Asad Ribic book that's coming out. I'm so tempted by this, if only because it's such a dumb concept, and it's also Jonathan Hickman and Asad Ribic like draw an alien like. That's so tempting. Paul G is going to be reading Frontier by Guillaume Singelin. This is a book that just recently dropped from Kickstarter. I just got my copy in the mail the other day. CK is going to be reading N-Word of God from Fantagraphics, if I'm not mistaken. And Brian's going to be reading Solo Leveling Volume 9. So, folks, let us know how those books are after you finish them, especially you, Danny. Let us know how Aliens versus Avengers is, because it's got one of the coolest like logo covers I've seen in a minute. But yeah, let me kick things back over to you, Jesse. What is on the top of your pile this week?
A manga called Foolknight, which
Okay.
I've gotten the paper edition, but also just been reading it on the Shonen Jump app.
Nice.
Sure.
And it's the premise is basically like the world's gone dark, like there's no sunlight, and because of that, like plant life is dying. And so what they're doing is terminal people, like with terminal diseases, can get plants planted in them. And that will like the plants will feed basically off the person, and that's like how the plant will survive. And basically they get paid this huge amount of money to do this, and they basically have about 2 years of life before the plant completely takes over. And it's following this like down on his luck guy who doesn't have any money, needs to take care of his mom, and so he fakes it, like he doesn't actually have a terminal disease.
No shit.
But he like is going to get all the money for having the plant basically put inside of him, and then he gets the plant put inside of him, and what he finds out is that he can now hear plants. Like he can hear these people that have turned into plants and like sort of their thoughts.
The Sixth Sense, is he the Haley Joel Osment of
well, like
of plant?
I don't know, and like stuff goes on from there, and it was just sort of, I was reading, I was like, there are so many ideas. Like you hear like the world's gone dark first, and then it's just like, yeah, but then there's plants, and then there's people with plants, and so it's just a lot of fun. I really dig the art. Like it's kind of got sort of like the classic manga backgrounds, but then like kind of this like scritchy sort of fine line art that I dig a lot. So yeah, that's what I've started and will continue reading.
Oh, the first chapter,
awesome.
I'm skimming through it on the Viz website. The first chapter has just a tree growing out of a man's face.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Okay,
like
this is cool.
It's pretty cool.
They're not
like,
burying the lead, huh? They're just
yeah.
This is what you signed up for. That sounds awesome.
How'd you come across this book?
Just on the Shonen Jump app. Like I was just like flipping through and looking at stuff. I was like, that looks interesting. I feel like that app is like why American companies aren't looking at that and being like, we should have that. Like because it's like it's like $3 a month. And it's so
heinous
much
how affordable
stuff.
it is. Yeah.
You know, it's so easy to use.
Jesse, I have to ask though, as a user of the Shonen Jump app, have you hit the 100 chapter limit and been because we have loyal followers of this podcast who have done it multiple times.
I don't think so. What is the? I definitely haven't. What is the limit?
So it'll make you stop if you hit 100. It'll basically
if you
Mike?
read 100 chapters in a day, like in a 24-hour period.
I mentioned the 3-year-old, right?
Right.
I do not.
Well, she can read too, Jesse. Come on. Between the two of you, you should be able to hit those.
I haven't come close to that. I can see it though. Like there is this like readability of manga that like it's just like that. I feel US comics, it's like if you give like a manga to someone who hasn't read manga and you explain to them like you got to read it backwards, like they'll just read it and no problem. I feel like if you give them an American comic book, they'll be like, I don't know what I'm looking at. Like you know, like the density of stuff and like all the everything, and it's sort of like, I don't know, it makes me like embarrassed. I'm like, yeah, they just do it better. And it's like, oh, where do you start? It's like beginning, like where do you start with Batman? It's like, who knows, like
how much time do you have?
Good point.
Like do you start with Dark Knight Returns? It's like, I don't think so, because that whole book is based on knowing everything about Batman. You start with like some weird issues that you probably won't like from the 50s, like then figure it out. But yeah,
do you have one or two manga picks for us that you really like that you want to, not to totally put you on the spot, but
like anything Naoki Urasawa. The one for like if people don't read manga, I would say is Pluto, because it's like 8 chapters, 7 volumes. Like 7 volumes. It's a small one. You know,
mean, by manga standards, a lot. I mean, like Monster is one of my favorite Urasawa books, and it's like 24 volumes or something. Like I've got the big like library editions on my shelf, so I think it's like 2 or 3 in one. But yeah, like that. Those are short, you know, compared to One Piece or Bleach or you know all the big ones that are out there, right?
And so that's the one I generally say. Like if you haven't, I mean, Akira and Nausicaa like are kind of like artistically like the ones that I sort of like impress me the most. Dragon Ball's kind of perfect, like like his cartooning and stuff, like. And I also feel with Dragon Ball, you could just pick up like the 3-in-1 volume, and and you will get enough. Like, and it'll be a satisfying read. If you don't like it, I think you probably don't like comic books.
Sure.
So like those would be ones. I'm trying to think of. Those are also like big ones, though.
Right. Are there any current or ongoing ones that you really?
No, I've sort of dropped off on currentness, and
Sure.
I don't really keep up that well. And also with manga, there's like this feeling of like, oh, I should read Bleach. Like I should try One Piece. And so like I've read like 3 volumes of Bleach, 3 volumes of One Piece, but those didn't really hook me. There's one Fire Punch. I think that's going on that.
Fire
Punch. like it just starts off with a person like who can regenerate their arms, cutting off their arm to feed other people because they can grow an arm back, and it gets cheerier from there.
I mean, I'll tell you, yeah, I read that series last year, maybe it was the year before, because that's the same creator who did Chainsaw Man, right?
Yeah. Oh,
and Chainsaw Man was on a break. I was like, well, let me go read this other book. It only gets darker from there. Like the beginning is so bright in comparison. Saying something.
A frozen world where people are dying to survive, like in a totalitarian state, and it gets darker from there.
But wait, there's more.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Gotcha.
But basically, this person who gets can regenerate gets set on fire by this person who has fire powers, and they can never die because they keep regenerating and burning, and that is Fire Punch. That one, I like that one. That was fun.
What a pick me up, yeah.
I like some older stuff too. I was rereading like Gunsmith Cats and stuff.
Okay.
And I feel like Ghost in the Shell I was rereading recently. That's like the Masamune Shiro. But yeah, it's kind of all over the place, kind of a mess.
Interesting. Well, I'll put Ghost in the Shell I've been meaning to read. At one point a while ago, I backed a Humble Bundle or something that had like a bunch of stuff. It had a ton of Ghost in the Shell, and I never actually sat down to read it. So maybe I'll dig into that. I like started a volume, and it's a little weird. It's a little weird,
but it's a little dense.
I think the denseness is what got me. I think
his storytelling, like there's a lot of implication of like what's going on, like what's happening, and it's like I feel like it requires me to pay more attention than I'm sort of capable of at the moment. But the sort of like what it's about, and for me being like pretty art driven, the art of it is so solid that's enough for me. I'll read a book if I'll just skim a book if I don't dig the story and just be like, this art's great. It's a great comic book.
Yeah, that's the one thing I will say is the art, even just in like the first, I don't know, volume that I dug into was like just absolutely cool. Just like all the cool, like take the Dragon Ball ridiculous like Capsule Corp stuff and then amp it up to like 50,000, and like that is what the Ghost in the Shell manga read like. But okay, we're peppering you with too many questions. I need to talk about a book that I read, or I'm going to read next, and then we will ask a few more questions before we wrap up our episode. So for me this week, I'm finally going to sit down and read this PEOW before they relaunched book called Soft. This is by Jane Mai, who also did PEOW, the comic book, which is the painfully embarrassing otaku weekend travel log style comic where it's about her and some of the folks who work at PEOW, the publisher, again before they relaunched, going to various comic festivals and kind of just the antics and the various people they ran into, and just her having a good time, having a rough time, feeling embarrassed, depending on where they were and what was happening. But this book, Soft, from Mai's website, she says Soft is about sad feelings, but they are lesbian sad feelings. A teenager named Laura has a vampire girlfriend, and their relationship is ... not the best, or is it? In parentheses, it's not. So I'm excited to see what this is. It's a short little book. Jane Mai's art is very fun and very cutesy. And I don't know, I'm just excited to just check something else out. I forgot that I had bought a bunch of digital PDFs before PEOW shut down, and this was one of those that was sitting in a folder on my Dropbox. So excited to dive into this. PEOW, for the record, is really fun, super delightful. If you can read that book, there's 2 volumes, PEOW 1, PEOW 2. I think you can buy them from the new PEOW store. And if I say PEOW one more time, I think Brian's head is going to explode, who's proof listening. So go check them out. Piao is also the way you can pronounce it. But I'm really excited just to see what else Jane Mai has, because, like I said, her work is very, very fun and very goofy in ways that just, it's very refreshing, from folks who are trying to tell stories about people and it gets very serious. But usually there's just like an aloofness to her writing and her art that I really, really appreciate. So yeah, that's what I'm reading next.
I haven't read them in PDF, but just like the physical object is like, like the paper feels good, the ink feels like everything. And then like the art, the sort of thematic world they have is just great.
Yeah, the PEOW, that is the one thing that I regret, is that I didn't buy all these books in like a physical format, because every single one of them is like a unique physical object. There's no like standard thing with this publishing company, and that's something that I always appreciated. Like Silver Sprocket, I know I've screamed their name from the rooftops here on the show, but that is one thing I also appreciate about them, is there is no, it's all about whatever the story is trying to do, right? Like I'll never get over the Frog in the Fall book that I have, this huge, weirdly binded, like double wide comic that could not exist in any other format than that, because of the way that Linnea Sturch did that book. So totally love that. So I guess to wrap up this show, Nick and I have a couple questions.
Do you want me to cover my book, or?
Oh, I guess we could go to your book. I'm sorry, Nick.
I mean, no pressure.
No.
We, I just.
Sorry, I misread the numbers. Go ahead, Nick. Tell us what you're reading next. I'm sorry.
It's okay. So I'm reading next, or technically already read, thanks to an advanced copy by Image. Thank you, Image. Convert #1. This is written by John Arcudi, art by Savannah Finley, colors by Miguel Coe, letters by Michael Geisler, with cover art by Simon Gain. Our listeners might be familiar with John Arcudi, who did The Creep at Dark Horse, The Mask at Dark Horse, as well as he recently did Two Moons at Image, which I thought was great. And is it done? Is it not done? I don't know. I thought it was a really fun kind of supernatural Civil War story, and who knows? Also did a lot of BPRD. So if you're a Hellboy fan, and I'm sure we'll get to Hellboy soon enough with Jesse here, interesting sort of little narrative, not unlike a story by today's guest. Arcudi has written this 4-part miniseries about a spacefaring voyage gone wrong that seemingly strands our protagonist on a strange and distant world with flora and fauna that are just as sort of dangerous as bizarre. But in this case, we're following a science officer named Oren Kutella, and Oren ends up sort of stranded. He's the science officer and sort of the sketch artist for this voyage. They brought him along on the off chance that maybe the imaging or whatever goes bad and they need someone drawing things. So he's off in the field, like drawing space butterflies or whatever. And his ship is trying to clear this fuel intake valve issue, and it blows up and he gets stranded. And we get treated to his journal entries as he sort of goes through burying his crewmates and deals with the fact that a successful rescue, he says, is going to take 331 months. Maybe they're not Earth months. Maybe it's not that bad, but probably is. And it's really well handled. These journal entries, the little caption boxes look like pieces of lined loose leaf paper with the spirals in the corner, and it's got a nice handwritten font to it to sort of make it look more like a journal entry. It's a nice little touch, and these nice little touches, like, they matter, folks. Like, interesting lettering, interesting, page design. People do pay attention to this stuff. The little things do add up. It's really really well done. I've never seen Finley's art before. A couple Google searches revealed nothing. So either Finley is completely new or just this literally is Finley's first work. And Finley and Co. And I don't mean Finley and Co. like Finley and crew. Like the colorist's name is Co. I'm not trying to make a joke here. Managed to sort of portray this, interesting dichotomy of like hard sci-fi tech alongside this like world of bizarro and weird creatures and like neon colors. It's really, really interesting. The only thing I found kind of bizarre about this first issue, especially in this day and age, is that the cover is done by Simon Gain, who I love. What was Simon Gain's book and image? They're Not Like Us, I think is what it was called. Absolutely, absolutely wonderful book. Gain is a wonderful artist. And it's not like Finley's art is night and day compared to Gain's. Like they're adjacent. They're definitely adjacent, but Gain is more cartoony and Finley is more realistic. And I just found it kind of weird that on a modern image book that they're kind of, and I know this is a loaded term, but it feels a little bait and switch with the cover artist and then the interior art being different. And it feels so weird that you would see that at Image. I don't know. Like I get that Gain is maybe more of a known entity, but like Gain's not Jim Lee, right? Like it's not that level of being known. Jesse, you want to wade in on like fame and comic books? I'm just kidding. I don't know. I just found that really weird, especially on an Image book, to see the cover art not done by the interior artist.
Is it? Are there multiple variants?
I couldn't find any variants for this.
It's Image number one, so you would think maybe there would be, but also like I was just reading the Kindle version, or rather, I was reading the provided PDF by Image, and so I would assume what I was looking at was the cover A, so to speak.
I don't know. I feel like now I think of that as almost the norm, that the cover will not match the interior. I feel like maybe 20 years ago they would be like, oh, you tricked me with this great cover, and then the interior is some other artist, or like the fill-in issue where it's like, oh, you got the regular artist to do the cover, but they didn't do that. But now, sure. I feel like looking at the cover, you have no idea what the interior is going to look like based on that, because there's so many variants.
This is true.
You'll even be like, oh, are there 6 issues out? Oh no, it's just 6 different covers of the same issue. It's not. I think if I were to pick up a book based on the cover art and then see something different, that's always a little bit of a drag.
Yeah, sure. I mean, like I said, like I think Finley and Gain are close enough here that it's not like the cover is Alex Ross and then the interiors are like, someone who's definitely not Alex Ross, right? Like it's a complete like aesthetic shift, right? These two are similar enough, but I don't know. Like I guess I just really love Simon Gain, and I just would love to see more Simon Gain. Simon Gain, let's get you on another project.
To your point though, Nick, like Finley's art is incredible in this book. Like I did read this one as well, and it is a gorgeous book, like absolutely gorgeous. So I mean, I think folks, if you're looking for like an interesting sci-fi story that is going to have like really beautiful art, like it feels almost like that Scavenger's Reign show, like the way that I feel like Finley's exploring like strange flora and fauna. If you saw that show on HBO, which is incredible. So yeah, I don't know. This book was really cool. But yeah, I was confused. I thought that Simon Gain was the artist on this book because Gain has done all of the covers for the books that they did interiors for at first. But either way, beautiful looking book.
Yeah. Check it out, folks, if you like sci-fi.
Yeah.
If you don't, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, we're going to talk more about sci-fi here in a second here.
Yes.
So Jesse, you've worked on a bunch of books very recently. Man's Best, I think, being one of the latest. TMNT, Black, White, and Green. You worked on that with our good pal Dave Baker. You worked on Miss Truesdale, like you said, ARCA, HEDRA, Planet Paradise. I think like plus a bunch of other indie things. So you've worked on some books that maybe folks have heard about, and then there's one book that I champion nonstop, and I talked to you for about a minute when we were at C2E2, and that is Faster.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like Faster's a book you put out through another publisher.
Yeah,
Can't remember the name off the top of my head. Yes.
So like a small, very really like a micro publisher.
Yeah. It's a really cool like reso print kind of book.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, are you a big fan of like rally or F1 racing, or did you just like wanted to do a book about people driving fast cars?
A little of both.
Okay.
Like I like F1. I don't really like keep up with it. And I
Jesse,
like...
that means we need a favorite driver, though. You're gonna have to give us a favorite driver. And then we're gonna silently judge you. But
no.
Niki Lauda, probably. Like, you know, it's his story. Like I guess, like, to me, kind of with all sports, it's like I like the stories like around the sports more than necessarily like baseball. It's like an individual baseball game, I'll enjoy it and it's fine. But if someone's like, baseball's boring, I'm like, yeah, kind of. Like, but like it's like the stories around baseball and that sort of stuff. And so like Lauda, like that he was in this horrible accident and like almost died.
Which people can see in the movie Rush, right?
Yeah, it was in Rush. You know, and he was like on fire, like, and almost died. And then he's back like 2 races later, like in so much pain, like wearing a mask. He's like burned on the side of his face, like, and he's racing competitively again. And it's like, I feel like that's crazy. But then he like retires, opens like an airplane company, like is like needs money, like is running this, you know, airline business, and then needs money for it. So he goes back to Formula One and wins again. Like, it's like, what? Like it's just sort of like crazy, like this person. And that, like, that season, I think it's 76, which is Rush is based on. It's like you read about it and it's like, how is this possible that this actually happened? Like the movie like doesn't make it dramatic enough, because it's like no one would believe it. So like I like F1 for that, and then those, and sort of like it's gotten steadily safer, which is for the best. But like the kind of danger element like that existed in the 50s and 60s, with basically these people being like, yeah, I'm willing to die, like for
no seatbelt
for this thing, like death is the distinct possibility. Like every season there were deaths, and now that just isn't the case, and that's better. But like there's something like, I don't know, just sort of very like compelling about these figures, these individuals. So there was that aspect, and then also like I do enjoy drawing cars and like race cars, and kind of like this sort of like, it felt like a good vehicle for like an absurdist,
nice pun,
sort of.
I noticed.
For like this kind of like absurdist sort of storytelling that I kind of like, where like, you know, it's like it's race cars and it's action, and then it's a guy fighting a shark, and like back to the race cars, and this kind of, I think of like, I kind of feel like personally I'm always like at odds with comics of like the way they work. Why do they have to work that way? And I'm like, and I with Faster, it's like very much like these like hard juxtapositions of like, yeah, you're getting this and then you're getting this, and like these sort of, I feel like a lot of comics, they take this movie look of like scene, and I'm like, you don't need to have scenes. You don't. It can be a panel. Like you could just have like a panel that's like totally in a different direction, and then have another panel, and that it creates this sort of synthesis. And so like using sort of race cars to do that, and like have this sort of like these like big jumps between panels. I felt like the speed and like the sort of like it sort of all sort of came together. I've Faster, like I probably said this to you, it's the book people talk to me about like the most at conventions, and like it really blows my mind that people like it. Like I'm like it's this book that like I feel is like doesn't fit a genre, like doesn't fit anything. It's my own like just like weird mind on paper, and it's like weird geeky comic books, and people are like, yeah, I really like this. I'm like, yeah, this race car book, like
Yeah.
you know,
Are you sure?
But I think to your point though, it is because you like with this book, it steps away from all of these like norms that I feel like a lot of comic books have fallen into, and creates its own set of rhythm. And I think maybe the first time you get like this very harsh like change of scene or change of whatever, maybe it's a little jarring for folks, but you're like, this is a short book, how crazy can it possibly be? And then it gets crazier, right? But I think that intentional change of pace is probably what drives a lot of folks who are looking outside the realm of like Big 10 comic books to say like, hey, what else is this person working on? And especially, and I know we talked about it for like a moment before we started recording about, you know, you kind of show up on the scene very suddenly for a lot of folks like myself, with HEDRA, and you're doing something very different with the medium that I think a lot of people are very curious about. So to move on and say, oh, what's this other faster book, is just kind of like a testament to the fact that people are looking for something a little bit different out there. So I don't know. I was blown away by it just because it felt like a nice change of pace, and like I said, there's a rhythm to the book that you kind of get into, and it does feel like a racetrack because as the story's ramping, so are all the like scenes and everything. So I personally appreciate it for that reason, just because there aren't many other comics doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah, like I feel like when I say I feel like I'm at odds with comics, I'm like, yeah, we could do other things, and like it's sort of like I feel like I feel like a lot of people sort of take this idea of like writing for comics, and it ends up being like film writing or like play writing. And it's like, it really doesn't have to be that. It could be more like writing where like, you know, like you read whoever you like JD Salinger, and it's just like this like string of imagery and stuff. And I think you can have the same thing visually. Like it doesn't need to be sort of like bound in the same way, like as like film, or like artists like thinking like, oh, it's a camera on a scene. It's like, oh, not really. There's no cameras. Like there's no, it's two-dimensional. It's paper. Like, you know, like you can move things around in a way that's sort of uniquely comics. And I think like with like in Faster, like that sort of like big jump between things, for me as a reader, like I feel like it's a more active involvement, because it's like you're sort of like filling in and you're connecting things, and I like to think that's more compelling. I don't know. I don't know if it is, but yeah, just sort of that play. And so when I can do my own stuff, more of that's possible, I think.
Yeah. No, that's very exciting. I mean, not to get too deep behind like your Patreon paywall or anything, but is there more faster potentially coming in the future?
Yeah, I've been working on the second issue, like 3 years later, of it, and like it has my production of it has had a lot of stops and starts, but I think I'm on the right pace right now. So hopefully next year there'll be a second issue. And right now it's out of print. The first issue is out of print, but we're talking about how to get it back in print without it being resale. Because the resale printing was a lot of fun and I like the way it looked, but it's really cost prohibitive. And so like, you know, it makes the price of the book just so much higher. And so we're trying to figure out how to have a similar look, but a more affordable printing.
Gotcha.
So that should be happening sometime. But yeah, I'm working on more faster, sort of pretty consistently.
Well,
awesome.
Not to be the corporate overlord here and you know derail this indie discussion, Jesse, but I do have to ask. I've discovered that you've got your own entry on Wikipedia. I have to ask,
what?
How does it feel to wield this level of unbridled power? I don't know if you've read it. It's pretty detailed. You probably should be checking that out if you haven't, because they know a lot about you, Jesse. They might know more about you than you do.
I don't think I have a Wikipedia entry.
Wikipedia.
Wikipedia.
Star Wars.
Yeah, I know Star Wars, but I'm saying I don't have a Wikipedia entry. Like,
How that pales in comparison to a Wikipedia entry. I mean,
don't think
honestly,
so.
you've already made it.
They just took my stuff from my website. Why does this go on so long?
Right?
What?
Right? You scroll down. I
That's
think your
funny.
address might be at the bottom. I don't know. I mean,
I'm surprised by this. That it actually goes for 3 paragraphs.
I mean, you know that Star Wars fans are generally relaxed and well-natured
This is
people who are
intense.
not prone to.
Lonergan also shared 2 other unlettered artwork spreads from Crash and Crew Do What They Do, one of which he felt was one of his favorites. What? Yeah, so
Jesse, I didn't write it. I just want to put that out there. I didn't.
No, I didn't realize that. I have realized that, like, Star Wars fans, I used to think of myself as one, and now it's like, I don't really count.
Well, they're very chill now, Jesse. That's the best part about them. They're very chill, very understanding, definitely not impulsive. Very cool folks.
Fandom has gotten, like, I feel like it's like with the access to everything, like what it means to be a fan has. I'm 45, so like has drastically changed in the last like 20 years, where it's like
it's gotten deranged.
Well, but like it's just that you have access to everything. Like, you know, like you, like when I was, you know, like buying CDs to listen to music, if you were like, I like The Clash, and like you hadn't heard Cut the Crap, it's like, yeah, well, who has? Like, it's this weird album that nobody liked, that doesn't have most of the band, and now it's like, well, you can find it anywhere. Like you know, like that idea of like you can watch every Star Trek episode easily now. Like what? But as opposed to like waiting for it to be on TV or buying like some ridiculous box set, like, and so like I feel that leads to this sort of intensity, like of obsession, of like you can really get obsessed, and you can like go through that artist's Twitter feed and find everything they had to say about the production of this 8-page story, which for me personally, my daughter, who just had her 3rd birthday, I drew that in the weeks after she was born, premature, like because I had like tried to like schedule it so that I would have time to take off when she was born, but she came early by surprise. And so I had to do this work, and I have virtually no memory of drawing it. Like I was so tired and so exhausted. Like I was just like, here, it's done, bye. Like, and so like to have people be like, whatever I said on Twitter 3 years ago, it's like, yeah, I don't really remember. And I think the writer Daniel Older, his child was born also really like right around that time, like really close. And it's just like, I don't know if either of us have much of a memory.
And does that mean your kids are named Luke and Leia? Is that what happened? Or
no? I'm adding this to the Wikipedia entry. Neither of them remember this book.
Yeah. So no, I mean, I remember like the build up to it. It's just like those 8 pages. Cause also like, you know, I'm working, so I draw fast. Like, you know, it's like 8 pages is like a week and a half. Like, you know, it's just like this like brief period. So yeah, that's an interesting thing. I didn't realize there was a Wikipedia entry just on me.
Right. One thing about the story, another thing is dedicated just to you. That's bonk. Well, thanks, Nick, for making this really creepy
Public
today.
Service announcement. Just trying to help. In the same vein, while we're on Star Wars, while we're talking about sacred cow franchises, I suppose. I mean, full disclosure, you know, you're one of those artists for me, Jesse, where I'll finish a franchise book and I'll think to myself, like, gosh, I'd love to see what so-and-so would do with this book. Because, you know, I feel like you're one of those artists out there who has a really different take on things. And obviously, I mean that in a very good way. And so, like, you know, I'll finish a Transformers book or like The Rocketeer or something like that. I'll be like, you know, it would be so interesting to see, you know, what someone like Jesse would do with this. I'm going to put this out there. Let's make this happen by the end of 2025, okay? Jesse Lonergan, Aliens OGN. I don't know anyone at Disney.
Right.
They're probably not going to like the things I just said about Star Wars. That's probably not going to help us. Okay.
I'll get on the phone with my uncle Bob Iger. Don't worry, Nick, it's fine.
But is there a franchise that you dream or really want to work on, and is it Aliens because it should be Aliens?
I love Aliens. I don't really like. I feel like some people have that sort of like, oh, I really want to work on this franchise or something. But
Yeah.
like for me, I don't really have that. So like, there's like, of course, it'd be cool to do something with Batman, but it's not like I feel like I have a take. And so like with franchises, it's sort of like the ones that I think Alien would be pretty cool. RoboCop would be like RoboCop would be a lot of fun.
I can see that.
Like leaning towards that sort of like futuristic sci-fi like period things. I don't think I'd be interested in. So like The Rocketeer. I assume it's all set in the 40s still. Like
for the most part,
I don't want to do that,
right,
like
yeah,
that
yeah,
research, that visual research to make it realistic. So like anything where it's like, oh, it's imaginative. So like the future of Detroit, or I think in terms of comics, I don't think there's any big franchises. Like I feel like I kind of lean towards like the weirder or like lesser things, like Metamorpho might be fun, or OMAC or something like that, where it's like things that aren't huge. Like Omega the Unknown would be like a fun one, maybe. You know, like kind of like these more like sort of small ones where you might get the freedom to actually do what you want. Because I feel like you know,
you don't want like an editor with the story Bible over your shoulder.
I don't like. And then there's also sort of like, you know, from if I were to do it like where I was writing the story too, like Batman to me, like I don't know what the Batman story is that hasn't been told, because he's a character that's basically been published continually, like every month for like 80 years. Like it's like so many iterations, and like, you know, so refined, and like I enjoy just being a fan of that. I don't really necessarily have much to add to it, I think. So yeah, Alien would be fun. RoboCop would probably be like up there. It's one of my favorites.
Interesting. It's just like nonstop panels of just RoboCop shooting guys in the dick over and over and over.
Yeah, it's sort of also sort of something where like I was talking about how like we have access to everything, but there's also just so much more now. Like that, like when you talk about Star Wars, it used to be like 3 movies, and then like now it's become like all these series. Like I've seen far more Boba Fett than I didn't realize I didn't want to see that much Boba Fett. Like it was like, oh, I was good with Empire and Return of the Jedi. That was enough Boba Fett for me to like think about and imagine and stuff. And you know, the amount of it, I sort of almost feel like takes away from it a little bit. Like it's not even in terms of like the quality of it. It's just like there's just so much of it. Like and there's sort of like too much to enjoy. It's like everything's moving towards all you can eat buffets as opposed to like, you know, a nice square meal. And so I guess like the bigger franchise, because they have that quality, even Alien now, it's getting to be like there's so much.
Well, Jesse, who owns Alien now? I'm just gonna rhetorically. I think you've made a really good point there.
I didn't realize it was Disney until recently. I thought it was something else. But I didn't realize. But I guess it's Disney. I guess Disney owns that.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, you know, I really appreciate the time that we've had today here. I'm very curious. Is there anything you could tell us about what you've been working on or what you've got coming next that we can look forward to? Yeah. And if not, that's totally fine. But
I've been working on this book Drome forever, since 2020. It's like this sort of like a stylistic follow-up to HEDRA. No narrative relationship, but like you know, not many words. There's a few, but extended sequences of wordlessness, really like design focused. and sort of this like mythological type story, like kind of drawing from like Beowulf and Gilgamesh and these sorts of stories. And it's like this big 312 pages, I think now. And that should be coming out next year.
Very cool.
Hopefully in the summer of next year, I think. But it's still being figured out. And that will be like the next solo thing I'm doing. And then everything else I've been working on, I don't think it's been announced.
Okay.
But like, I post the stuff I'm working on Patreon. And so I try and be pretty regular with that. I'm not sure how good I am sometimes, but
yeah. I mean, as a follower, I appreciate the semi-regular updates. It doesn't have to be every day. I follow some folks that are just like, it's like 3-4 times a week, and I'm just like, I only have so much time to read about everything.
3 or 4 times a week. I was like, I can't keep up with this.
Yeah. But no, it's great. That's very exciting to hear that Jerome is hopefully coming out sometime next summer. That's really, really cool. I guess for folks who are curious to find more about what you've been working on, where can they find you on the internet?
Website is just jesselonergan.com. And then Instagram probably is where I'm the most active in terms of social media. And I'm Jesse.Lonergan on Instagram. Those are the two main places.
Perfect. I'll make sure to put some links to those in the show notes, as well as Patreon, all that other stuff, just so folks are aware. But yeah, I think that wraps us up for today. Thank you for going a little bit longer than we planned. This has been a blast chatting. I want to say thank you to everyone. Thank you to Brian for proof listening. Thank you to Nick for this episode. Thank you, Jesse, for coming to be a guest today. Thanks for everyone listening on Discord today. Next week's show is going to be a pre-recorded app. It's Kara and Kate and Zach doing a book versus book, where they are reading Heavy Vinyl #1, Fraction and Aha's Hawkeye #1, and Catwoman #1 by Brubaker and Darwin Cook. So that'll be a fun discussion. I've listened to the episode already, and it's immaculate. It's incredible. Also, really good picks by everybody. So go listen to that next week. And I think that about covers it for today. So again, Jesse, thank you so much for coming on the show. And until next time, comics are good, and so are you.